sorry. Okay, so we're going over the assignment this week for week 7, reflection 3. So again, just to review real fast, to get all 25 points, you have to this forum, post an original discussion. It has to be, your original discussion has to be 250 words minimum. And you have to reply to one student that doesn't have anybody that's responded to them. If all students have at least one response, then you can reply to anybody. So you have to pretend that you're a judge in a court in Ashlandia. And I stole that from Dr. Oliveri because she came up with that Ashlandia, and I thought that was pretty cool. And this person was arrested last night by the Ashlandia Police Department for driving under the influence of marijuana. A telephonic warrant was received by the officer and blood was taken from this person, and the nanograms of marijuana in the person's blood hasn't come back. So we don't know what the level of marijuana was in their blood, but it was confirmed that the person did have marijuana in their blood and that the person was under the influence of marijuana when they were driving the vehicle. So you're the judge of the only court in Ashlandia. So you can do what you want because you have discretion in the court. Unfortunately, at this point, you cannot find out any further information about the circumstances surrounding the stop of the vehicle. The only information available is the information I've given you. You can explain your thinking during your original posting. I mean, you have 250 word minimum that you have to use up. So I want you to explain your thinking. But in the end, you have to make a decision. So I don't want you to say, well, I could go this way or I could go that way. You're the judge. You have to make a decision. So the way you're not going to get points is if you say, well, if this was this or this was that, I would do that. You can't do that. You have to make a decision and you have to give a ruling of what you're going to do to this person, meaning I'm going to give the person community service, or I'm going to give the person a fine, or I'm going to give this person 30 days in jail or 10 days in jail, or a combination of 2 or 3 things. And you're going to explain your reasoning why. And you can't say, if I knew more information, okay? You cannot give that explanation. Do some research into this, okay? We've had some classes on this. You have chapter 7 in your book. I want you to look up what happens when people drive under the influence of marijuana. I want you to look into this because that's what judges do. They look at all of the facts. And I don't just want you to do some Google research. I have given you links at the top of your Moodle page to our librarian and to Hannon Library, where you can go do some real research into journals, into research of what happens. Okay, where you can find out, because anybody can write a Google paper on Google and say, oh, this is the data. I made that mistake when I first asked students to decide whether or not the Australian gun ban was a good thing or a bad thing. And it was really interesting because I had students documenting that it was a good thing and here was the data, and it was a bad thing and here was the data. And unfortunately, I didn't require them to utilize documented journals and documented research through verified resources. And I learned that really fast, that you have to do that because, like I said, you can go do a Google research and put whatever you want on there. So you guys need to utilize the same type of research, because you'll soon find out anybody can say anything and put it on Google, and you'll soon learn that that's not always true. So you need to be really careful when you do research. It's really easy to research something and it's really quick. However, it's not always true. So make sure you go to our Moodle page, you look up through Hannon Library, any research that you do on the effects of driving under the influence when you make your decision as a judge, and you back up your decision. Okay, you want to get your 25 points. You want to fill up your 250 word minimum. The way you don't get those is by not filling up your 250 words, not making your original posting, not responding to somebody, but also by not making a decision. Okay, you have to make a decision as a judge. That's what a judge does, and that's what you guys are feeling the burden of here. Any questions with this assignment? All right. I'm just letting some people in. All right, with everybody coming in, I've recorded this, so I just went over the Reflections reassignment, so you can watch that. It's pretty detailed, so make sure you go over what that assignment is. All right, we are going to get into the PowerPoint today, which I have posted. It's continuation of part 2 of the court system. So I'm going to share my screen with you. And again, if you have questions during this, please let me know. Let me make sure. I want to make sure. Yep, I'm recording. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure I was recording. Okay, so what I'm trying to do with this first part is we've covered kind of the big picture of courts. And what I want to do now is kind of bring it home. And then we're going to look at some different really important decisions with court cases and how they affect kind of our three-pronged system. So once we get going, you understand what I mean. All right, so we went over last class with our courts. We went over SCOTUS and the US Supreme Court. We went over how we have district courts, and we went over trial courts and all the different big federal court system and state courts, and how we have our own state constitutions and we have our own US Constitution. Well, we also have our own within our states. That system goes even further. For example, and I'm going to kind of focus in on Oregon. And so for those of you that are local, it'll make a little more sense. For those of you that aren't, I'm sorry if it doesn't totally make sense and I didn't focus on where you're from. But for example, in Ashland, we have our own city attorney, and the city attorney does certain things for Ashland. So when you have a police department in Ashland and people get pulled over by the police in Ashland, or when you have the mayor or the city council and things happen in Ashland, there's a legal division that represents the mayor and the city council and the Ashland Parks. If something happens to somebody in the Ashland Parks, or somebody sues the police in Ashland, there's actually a legal division where there's a city attorney that actually gets paid for by the people. Well, who pays that city attorney? Does anybody know where we get the money to pay for that city attorney in Ashland? Somebody want to tell me? Nobody knows?
Is it from tax money?
Okay, tax money. So does that mean when I go to the store and I buy a Slurpee at 7-Eleven, or when I go to Albertsons and buy something, or what? What do you guys think?
No, because there's no sales tax in Oregon.
Okay, so what do you think tax money? Come on. I'm gonna stop. What do you guys think? Where do we get the money? Who pays for that city attorney? Actually, who pays for our cops? Who pays for those firefighters?
The federal government, maybe?
The federal government.
Like we get, I don't know, maybe we get taxes from them. I genuinely don't know.
I love asking questions like this because it makes you think. Who pays for teachers?
It's all our,
dollars. Okay, hold on.
sorry, no, isn't it our tax dollars, right?
Okay, what tax? Yeah, okay, you guys are right. I'll give it to you.
Say,
tax dollars.
I would say the money that when I look at my check, like the money that isn't there, I think that's the money.
Okay, those tax dollars. Okay.
Yeah, those tax dollars. Like when I get my paycheck, and then when I look at all the money that has been taken away in taxes, I think that's the money that goes to pay for those things.
Okay, Aiden, good try.
Darn it.
And good try. No, good.
Oh.
And those taxes are good, but it's actually know that, and that those tax dollars pay for a lot. They do, but no, it does not pay for that city attorney. It does not pay for the Ashland police or the Ashland fire or the teachers at your local high school or your local elementary. You can try again? Okay, go ahead.
I'm
Try
trying
again.
Okay, so because we don't have a sales tax like Washington, we have a property tax, and I'm going to guess it's our property tax.
Yes. So for those
Let's
of
go.
you, there you
Let's
go.
go.
Yeah,
Congratulations, you
touchdown.
got it, man.
There you are. So for those of you that are buying any type of property or a house, you pay taxes every year. And those taxes are going to pay for your police, your fire, your city council, your mayor, your teachers, all of that. So yes, you are correct. That's what's, but if you're not buying a house or property, you are not. So if a cop has pulled you, I love this when I was a cop. So when I used to pull people over, the most common thing I heard is, I pay your salary. And I used to go, are you buying a house? And they would say no. And I'm like, no, you're not paying my salary. Actually, no, I never said that. I'm joking. I never said that. But seriously,
Wait,
that's who's paying your, so seriously, if you've ever said to a cop, I pay your salary, and you're not buying a house, or then you're actually not paying their salary. So just so you know where your money's going. Be informed, you guys. Be informed where your money's going and what you're paying, because that's huge. Just so you know, if you're, depending where you're living in Ashland, I mean, you know, you could pay upwards of, depending on how much your house is. I mean, most homeowners could pay $6,000 to $10,000 a year, depending on how much their house is. That's how much they're paying. And you know, look at what services you're getting, because some people could live in a house and not have any kids, and they're paying for, what services are they paying for? But yet some people could live and have 10 kids, and they're paying for police services, fire, and schools. So do you see where I'm going? And a lot of people love, for example, in Nevada, I wanted the lottery so bad, but we didn't have the lottery, because what does lottery pay for? School. It goes, a lot of the money goes towards schools and parks, right? But then, you know, a lot of people don't like it because, you know, it enables gambling. But then in Nevada, why do you think they don't have lottery in Nevada? We didn't have lottery in Nevada. Does anybody know why?
Because there's so many casinos.
Yeah, they didn't want it, because if I go to 7-Eleven and I'm playing the lottery, they think that I'm not going to go where? To the casino, right? So anyway, it's just got all this stuff going on. So anyway, but definitely know your tax dollars and what's going where and what's going to pay what. Okay, so let's go back.
It's also not worth the lottery, because the problem with lottery is, I worked for a tax firm for a bit. You know, I would do like the simple ones, but they would like tell me about the, you know, rich people who get like, you know, really good lottery tickets. You are taxed so much on lottery that it's like, it makes it almost not even worth it.
Oh, aren't your chances of winning too? Like, I mean, I guess I could get hit 10 times by lightning or something like that before I would win. So, I mean, it's just the numbers out there. But, you know, I do know that, you know, I remember my sister was a school teacher, and she used to always come to Oregon and go, oh, I'd like to play, because, you know, the money goes towards building schools and parks. And so, you know, I mean, it's just all perspective of where you go. All right.
People win so much more here than they did in California. Like, not even kidding. All my coworkers are like, yeah, we were in like, you know, 15,000. I'm like, what the heck, man? I'm going to start doing lottery in Oregon.
All right. Okay. So that's just a little bit of trivia of tax dollars, but it just shows you city attorneys, the different money. And then, yes, you guys were very smart though, as far as talking about which states have. You'll hear a lot of people that retire that won't want to move to certain states, or will want to move to certain states because they have a income tax or no state income tax, or a state tax, or things like that. So very interesting stuff. All right. So we're going to go back to our PowerPoint. All right, so back to the city attorney. So that's just a legal division. So for example, when I worked for the police department, if somebody if I did something under the police department and somebody wanted to said what I did violated their Fourth Amendment rights, and they were going to sue the police department, that would fall under our city attorney as far as backing me up. Now, obviously there's questions. What did I do? Was it legal? Is the department going to cover me? If it did, the city attorney would cover me. Obviously, I wouldn't have to go out and buy my own attorney if what I did was covered underneath and was protected. All right, Ashland Muni-Court. So we actually have a municipal court in Ashland. There's a judge, and this judge holds court every Tuesday. So if you're driving in Ashland and an Ashland police officer pulls you over, so that's the cop side of the American criminal justice system, that officer's saying, hey, I saw you run that stop sign. That's a violation. They're going to say, they're going to give you probably 3 to 6 weeks, somewhere around there, to go to court. You'll go to Ashland Muni-Court, and it looks like they hold court every Tuesday. Juvenile court cases looks like they're held 8:30 a.m. and you'll go to court every Tuesday. The court has jurisdiction over 3 types of cases, all which must take place within Ashland city limits, which are traffic violations, and they are most misdemeanors. So again, Muni-Court, when we say Muni, that's municipal, which means, again, misdemeanor cases. Same with my city. When we were in North Las Vegas, it's only misdemeanors. Anytime you're dealing with anything other than misdemeanors, felonies, that is going to go to your county. And we'll talk about that in a minute. All right, so your Muni-Court judge, again, deals with minor traffic violations. It's generally handled at the front by your court staff. A lot of times you can ask, especially if it's your first time, you can ask for traffic court, and you can ask, hey, I want to go through, you watch a video, and they'll knock it down. The fees are knocked down. You watch a video, because the main goal, again, as I've talked about you guys, is you're driving a deadly vehicle, is to slow you down. That's the main goal, is to teach you, hey, look, this is serious what you're driving. We want to teach you to stop at stop signs. We want to teach you to pay attention. We want to teach you that, hey, this is a serious thing, and to slow down, and that's the main goal. All right, Medford, Oregon. So Medford, Oregon is another city in its own right. It has a municipal court where they handle their own parking, traffic, city ordinance. Most of the citations are handled at the clerk counter between the hours of 8 and 4:30. They have a place where you can get a status of their municipal court cases. They do a circuit court matters. They have a landlord-tenant dispute desk. They also have a felony and DUI offenses area. They also have a desk that handles consumer complaints. So again, if you're calling the police department, they're going to say, nope, you can come down to our area where we handle consumer complaints. They have an Oregon State Bar lawyer referral service. So if you come in and you say, hey, I need a lawyer, they have a referral service, and then they have a public defender desk as well. They also have a place where they do dismissible traffic violations. So if you get a citation from an officer for any one of these, and I'm going to cover them in a minute, all you have to do is fix it, and you'll go to Medford, Oregon, to the municipal court area, and they'll sign off saying it's been fixed, and they dismiss it. So if you get that your brakes aren't working, your brake light, your fenders, headlight, horn, mud guards, muffler, reflector, tail lights, turn signals, tinted windows, cracked windshields, failed to notify DMV of change of address or name change, failed to change address on vehicle registration, failed to renew registration, failed to carry registration card, failed to pay appropriate registration fee. And normally these happen if you get pulled over for another reason, and the cop will say, hey, I'm going to warn you for this, you need to do this. Failed to carry proof of insurance, studded tires when they're not allowed, operating without proper exhaust system, visible emission lights, failed to display license plate. That's normally not having a front license plate. And this one kind of makes me mad, because like right now I drive the vehicle that I have doesn't even have a place to screw it in. So I would like have to, I don't know what I would do to put a front plate in, but most states require you to have a front and rear license plate. And I get that, because you need to be identifiable. I get that if somebody hits my car from behind and I can't see him drive away from the front, I want to be able to identify him. But a lot of manufacturers, why don't they require them to be able to put a front license plate on? But anyway, what's cool about Medford is they have a place where you can drive in, you can fix whatever the problem is, and they sign off on it and they dismiss the ticket. They also have Medford, it's already ready to go, a traffic school program where, again, if you have a bad behavior like driving too fast or running stop signs, then they let you go through traffic school and they'll dismiss or reduce the traffic ticket, whatever it is. And again, it's motivated you to just realize, hey, what you're doing is, just like I explained earlier, is we're trying to get you to be safe so that you're driving a deadly vehicle, and we want people to be safe on the road. And then this is talking about what the qualifications. You have to be cited for a single moving violation without an accident. Because the big thing is, if you're already involved in an accident, they're not going to let you go through traffic school. You can't have any prior moving violations, because what they're saying is, hey, if you keep getting moving violations, then obviously traffic school isn't working, and you can't have a commercial driver's license. All right, then we've got, move this out of the way, Jackson County. So Jackson County, this is where I just said, remember, misdemeanors in your municipal courts handle the misdemeanors. Jackson County is where we go through for your felonies. So in Jackson County, this is our highest court. This is where we have our Supreme Court. It's the highest court in Oregon. It has 7 justices, the only court that may reverse or modify a decision in the Oregon Supreme Court is the U.S. Supreme Court. It has the Court of Appeals. It's the first level of appeal following a court trial. And we also have tax court, which has statewide jurisdiction to hear cases that involve Oregon tax laws, income taxes, corporate excise taxes, property taxes, timber taxes, which is really big in Oregon and Washington, because we have one of the biggest timber, most of the timber in all of the world, cigarette taxes, local budget laws, and property tax limitations. All right, we also have circuit courts, each of Oregon's 36 counties. We have 36 counties in Oregon. Wow. And each one of our counties has their own sheriff's department, has a circuit court. Isn't that crazy? So that's a lot of circuit courts. We also have our own local courts. So just like I went over Medford and Ashland municipal courts, every local municipality has their own local courts. And we also have administrative hearing officers that hear cases involving administrative rules, such as DMV and employment department. All right, so, really fast, what it means by such as DMV. Let me give you an example. A lot of, especially in your larger jurisdictions like where I was from, they had their own DMV courts. So we had our own DUI DMV courts that all they did was hear the DUI cases. There were so many people driving under the influence that was all they heard all day long. So whenever I wrote any citations or did an arrest for DUI, that was the court I went to, was a DMV court for DUIs. So you also have those types of courts. All right, so any questions on just the municipal courts and the circuit courts? I just want to review those really fast, just so you know, wow, there's a lot of different courts out there. Okay. We've already reviewed the amendments. I just wanted to kind of put them in context again, just to make sure you understand them. So again, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution are collectively known as the Bill of Rights. So just want to make sure you remember that. And the First Amendment states that Congress shall make no law prohibiting free exercise of religion or abridging the rights of free speech and peaceful assembly, and the police are frequently involved in protecting these rights. The police may become involved in dealing with those whose speech goes beyond the limits of First Amendment protections. and they may arrest an individual whose verbalizations constitute a clear and present danger to others. So it's when that line gets crossed. Hate speech, fighting words, and obscenities may also lead to police intervention. So again, that crossing of that line. And then also Fifth Amendment. So I just want to make sure this is understood as well. So I'm going to stop right now sharing the screen because it's really, really important. I want to make sure that the Fifth Amendment is really understood because this is one of the most misunderstood concepts due to TV shows. So Fifth Amendment, Miranda. Does anybody want to explain it to me? When do police have to read Miranda? Anybody can explain this other than if you're in my introduction to law enforcement class, because we've gone over this at length.
Isn't it when they plan on questioning you?
Okay, so you got one part of it. Very good. Good job. So when police, that's one part of it. When police want to question somebody, that's one part of it. They have to read you Miranda, but we're missing another part. We're missing some other parts. Okay, so, and I always give this example, and I used to get this a lot. And it's kind of my frustrating thing, and I think it's because on TV shows they show this all the time, and it makes me want to pull out my hair. Two things that they show on TV shows all the time make me want to pull out my hair. One is showing actors that don't utilize anybody on law enforcement as an expert. And you can always tell because it shows actors searching or utilizing a gun where they have their finger on the trigger, because anybody that has ever been around a gun in law enforcement knows the finger is never in the trigger until they are ready to pull the trigger. So whenever you see, and start paying attention now, watch movies. Anytime you see an actor in a role with a gun, the only time that finger should be in the trigger is when they're pulling it. If that finger's in the trigger at any other time, you tell yourself, Professor Mori told me they don't have a law enforcement professional on that scene as an expert. Because that's not just how things are done. You just don't ever do it. We don't have full controls of our muscles. So if we sneeze or we trip or we do anything, that trigger could get pulled and we could have an accidental discharge, and that's not good with guns because that's when people get killed when they shouldn't get killed. So that's my number one thing that pulls out my hair. Number two thing is the misunderstanding of Miranda. And that's because how many TV shows have you seen? Law and Order is the biggest violator of this, and I love Law and Order other than that, where they go and arrest somebody, they've already done questioning them or they're whatever, and they're reading them Miranda. Number one, they've memorized it, which is so not true. We don't read Miranda like that. We read it from a card, and there's a reason for that, a very smart reason. No officer, I can't remember the last time I've ever seen an officer memorize Miranda and read it like that, ever. And number two, we just don't arrest somebody, put them in handcuffs and put them in the back of the car as we read Miranda. That just doesn't happen, period. We're reading Miranda because we think you're a suspect. We think you've done something, and we're trying to get you to confess. And we want to talk to you in an interview room and get you to confess. Because number one, you're not free to leave. And number two, we want to question you because we think you did something. The crime we're trying to get you to confess to. Okay? So how many movies have you seen, again, that the detectives or the police are arresting somebody, putting them in the back of the car, and they are just, from their memory, reading Miranda? I bet you've seen it a ton of times, right? It's not real life, folks. Again, not real life. It's kind of like somebody getting shot in a movie and flying back 5 feet. That doesn't happen, folks. You know why that's happening in the movie? Because they're on a wire, the actor's on a wire, and they're flying back 5 feet, and there's a big old pad that they're flying back 5 feet to, because that's a movie. That's why that's happening, because in real life, when you get shot, you don't fly back 5 feet. Okay, it doesn't happen. So that's just like Miranda. So that's why you don't, so you can't believe what TV tells you. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. Miranda's not. So just to clarify, and you're going to see this in a quiz, but just to clarify, Miranda only needs to be read when somebody is not free to leave, they are being detained, and they are about to be interrogated, not questioned, interrogated. Okay, and I know I said questioned earlier, but sorry, that was my mistake. Interrogated. Okay, so that's called, it's kind of a pronged statement, what I'm saying. So does that make sense to everybody? I hope it does, because it's really misunderstood. I used to pull over people when I would see them or radar them running. And I'm going to ask you this question, and I'm going to ask you to answer it in chat why this is wrong. So figure this out in your mind. I would see them or radar them in a 45-mile-per-hour speed zone doing 70 miles per hour. So I ran the radar, click. They were doing 70 and 45. And I pull them over, and they'd say, and I'd write them a ticket, because I'd say, you're speeding. They go, no, I wasn't. And they go, you have to read me Miranda before you can write me the ticket. And I go, no, I don't. Why were they wrong? Why don't I have to read them Miranda before I wrote them a ticket? Answer me in chat. Why don't I have to read them Miranda before I write them a ticket for speeding 70 miles per hour in a 45 when I ran them, or when I ran the radar that showed them doing Okay, so number one, I was detaining them. They weren't free to leave. So that prong, that prong is there. Okay. However, am I interrogating them? Did I ask them any question? Interrogating means I am like grilling them, right? I'm questioning them like over and over. It's a level higher than questioning. Okay. I didn't ask them one question. Why would I ask them any questions? I saw them with my radar doing 70. Why would I need to question them? I saw it with my own eyes and my radar gun that's been calibrated. It's kind of like seeing a video of somebody doing the crime, but being there videoing it. There's no questioning that needs to be done. Why would I need? So yeah, one of the prongs is there. I'm detaining them. However, there's no interrogation that needs to be done because I already saw them. So it's just, it's one of those questions that makes no sense. And I blame it on, again, TV, people's misunderstanding of TV. And again, the misunderstanding of the job that it takes, and I will go back to, it takes 2 years of training and testing to become a police officer, and to become a baby police officer and barely understand the job and still need a lot of help and a lot more training to get good at it. So there's no way you're going to watch some TV shows and get good at it. That's why you don't understand it. That's why you don't understand Miranda. That's why it's difficult and you're not. So, all right. So, but make sure you understand it. If you don't, this is the time to ask questions. It sounds like you understand it because your chat definitely made you understand it. But any questions on Miranda? Sounds like you understand it. This is the time to ask questions. All right, let's get back. Okay, 14th Amendment. Make sure you understand this. This is really important. This is called the Due Process Amendment. And we've covered it before. I just want to make sure it's one of those important amendments that states no state can deprive a person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. And this is an important time to go over it when we're covering the courts. It requires that evidence of a crime be presented in court, and this is really important because we're getting ready to go over evidence, and that both testimonial and physical evidence is obtained according to the rules discussed. So this is where we're getting ready to go now. Okay, so we're getting ready to do some group work, and this time I'm going to have you work. I'm going to give you about 10 to 15 minutes. I'm going to come check on you at the 10-minute mark. I'm going to put you in, get a piece of paper. You need to write this down, or take a picture of this with your phone, because I don't know what group you're going to end up in. So I'm going to give you a couple minutes to write this down or take a picture of it. Group 1, you're going to investigate the exclusionary rule. Group 2, you're going to investigate the fruits of the poisonous tree. Group 3, you're going to investigate the good faith doctrine. Group 4, you're going to investigate inevitable discovery doctrine. And group 5, you're going to investigate exigent circumstances. And so what I'm going to have you do is I'm going to put you in 5 different groups. And then in those groups, you're going to choose a guest speaker, somebody that's good at speaking, because, and then you're going to have, the rest of you are also going to go do some Google work, and Google's fine for this. And you're going to go investigating whatever group you're in, that's what you're going to have. So if you're in group 1, you're going to have the exclusionary rule, or whatever room you're in. I guess it won't give you a group, it'll give you a room. So if you're in room 4, you're going to have the inevitable discovery. So start doing some Google work and start researching what it means, and then you're going to get some cases and start researching the cases and what they are. And then what's going to happen is we're going to come back together, and you're going to have a good speaker that's going to explain to the rest of us. For example, if you have room 3, you're going to tell the rest of us what the good faith doctrine is, an example of a case of where we got the good faith doctrine. Or if you're in room 2, your speaker is going to tell us what the fruits of the poisonous tree is and an example case, and you're going to go over what that case is. So for example, when I talked about Terry v. Ohio, I gave you my bubblegum version of Terry v. Ohio. So make sure you have a good speaker. And this time I'm going to actually call on you. I'm going to say, okay, room 1, so you can't pretend or get away with not knowing which rooms you are. So you're going to have to actually do this. So it's probably going to take you 10 or 15 minutes. I will come check on you at that 10-minute mark to kind of see how you guys are. Did everybody get all the rooms and where you're at? Yep. Okay, let me get some breakout rooms going. I'm going to pause. All right, so welcome back, everybody. All right, so we're going to start with kind of the main one, which is the exclusionary rule with room 1. Welcome. Who is our guest speaker for room 1?
I am.
All right, so go ahead and tell us about the exclusionary rule and the case you guys chose.
All right, so for the exclusionary rule, the case that it deals with the 4th Amendment, and the case that we chose was Medford v. Ohio, which was a landmark court case and decision of the U.S. Supreme Court that was obtained by violating Fourth Amendment rights, which the 4th Amendment prohibits unreasonable search and seizures. So evidence in this case was used that was obtained by police without a valid search warrant, or at least without providing a valid search warrant to the person that they were searching the house from. And because of that, even though they found lewd and illicit photographs and books in this person's house, that evidence was not able to be used in court because it was obtained illegally.
Okay, so good job. So I'll kind of give you like the bubblegum version, how I remember Medford v. Ohio and the exclusionary rule. So good job, Tegan. So what happened was, so they actually had, police had a bombing suspect. So they go to Mrs. Mapp's house and they don't have a warrant. and they want to get inside that house to look for the suspect of this bombing. And they don't take the time to get a warrant, and so they knock, knock, knock on the door, and Mrs. Mapp answers, and she knows her rights per the Fourth Amendment. And she answers, and she's like, hello, and police are like, let us in. And she's like, where's your warrant? And they are like, we don't need a warrant. And she's like, goodbye, and she shuts the door. And so 3 hours pass, they come back, and they think that they're a lot smarter than her, so they're like, knock, 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 and Mrs. Mapp's like, hello, where's your warrant? And they go, oh, here it is, Miss Mapp. And they fold it up and they put it in their pocket, and she goes, let me see it. And they go, we have it right here, it's in our pocket. So they bust their way on in, and they don't have a warrant, and they don't find the bombing suspect. However, they look inside the vehicle, and guess what they find? A bunch of pornographic material, really bad stuff. I don't know if it was Mrs. Mapp or who was looking at some really bad stuff with kids, and not good. And so they do some arrests, and lo and behold, there's some arrests made, and the cops are patting themselves on the back and look what we did. However, they forget that that piece of paper that was in their pockets wasn't a warrant. So Mrs. Mapp and everybody that was arrested for all this pornographic bad stuff that was really bad gets a really good defense attorney, and they go, you didn't have a warrant? You had 3 hours, you didn't get a warrant? That's the Fourth Amendment. You didn't have probable cause. You can't enter. You're not the Gestapo. You can't enter a person's house like that. You can't do that. So guess what? All that porn, gone. They get out, gone. So that's the exclusionary rule, and that's my bubblegum version of that. So good job, you guys. All right, let's move on to fruits of the poisonous tree, to room number 2.
Yes, so fruit of the poisonous tree is any evidence that is legally obtained and therefore can't be used in court. So like, for example, like an illegal wiretapping or anything like that. Our best example of this was the Silverthorne Lumber versus United States, which happened in 1920, where federal agents illegally obtained tax books from Silverthorne Lumber, and then they proceeded to make copies of the records, and they made the argument where the copies of illegally obtained records could be used in court, but it didn't go that way. The ruling was that the evidence wouldn't be allowed in court, and so that just didn't work out. The ruling was that they ruled against it because it would encourage police to circumvent the Fourth Amendment in the future. But it wasn't actually called the fruit of the poisonous tree at the time. The first time it gained that name was in 1939 in Nordan versus the United States, which was another case of trying to use a testimony via unlawful tapping.
All right, so good job, room 2. Good job, Jonah. All right, so fruits of the poisonous tree. This is, the way I think about it is, you know, if you have a tree, especially a fruit tree, and it's poisonous, and you eat an apple from that tree, that apple's going to be poisonous. You know, it's kind of like Snow White ate the apple. So in a case that always made me remember that as a cop was Arterburn versus State. And this is kind of an interesting case, and I always remembered this because people that give consent. And so it always made me remember people that give consent. So Arterburn police learned about Arterburn because he was associating with a theft of a vehicle with other suspects. And so they find him, and he's really nice. He's just a nice guy. And so they take him to the station because he's associating with all these people that are stealing vehicles. And they say, hey, can we search you? And he's like, sure, go ahead. And they search him, and he has all these drugs on him, right? And they arrest him. And they find out, he gets a good defense attorney, and he's like, hey, you know, I kind of think that the information they had to stop me in the first place was bad. And the Supreme Court goes, you know what? that information that you had that he was associating with criminals about the theft of the vehicle wasn't good information. You shouldn't have stopped that Fourth Amendment right to stop him. You didn't have the right to stop him. So that consent he gave you, you shouldn't have stopped him in the first place. So he really would, if you didn't have the right to stop him in the first place, he wouldn't have given you consent. So guess what? That drug that he consented you to find, you wouldn't have found that drug. So remember that tree, the fruit hanging? If you wouldn't have been able to stop him in the first place, you wouldn't have found those drugs. Isn't that interesting? So it just reminds me, be careful what you do, because if what you do in the beginning is illegal, everything else, even if somebody gives you consent, is thrown out too. All right. So good job, guys. All right. So let's move on to the good faith doctrine with room number 3.
That's my group. So the good faith doctrine, in essence, is an exception to the exclusionary rule. And the exclusionary rule is that evidence that's gathered unlawfully cannot be used, like what you were talking about. And so essentially, if a search warrant is used incorrectly, or it's incorrectly issued by a judge, officers would get to keep the evidence that they gather because of that warrant, because they used the warrant in good faith that it was valid. And so there are 2 main cases. I'm just going to talk about one, but Arizona v. Evans is another one that's a good example. But the one that established the good faith doctrine was United States v. Leon in 1984. And so in California, the police received a tip that people were drug dealers. So they started surveilling their homes and following leads based on cars frequenting them, based on possible buyers or other possible drug dealers. And so the police found 2 others that they thought were involved in the drug dealing, one of whom was Leon. And they got a search warrant, found some evidence, and the warrant was later found to be invalid because the police lacked probable cause. But because the police performed the search after they got the warrant, they were acting in good faith. And this was ruled in a 6-3 majority in favor of the good faith doctrine. So they were allowed to keep that evidence.
All right, good, Monica. So we looked at, a case, where this is one where, and I'm not sure if it was in this class or Introduction to Law Enforcement, but where cops were looking at a vehicle and they ran the plate and the registered driver came back as having a warrant. And so they pulled over the driver, they arrested him for the warrant. He had a warrant for, I think, domestic battery. They arrested him. They did a search incident to arrest because they arrested him. He had drugs. He had like PCP or acid in his pockets. They get to the jail and guess what? The warrant, he had paid it. And so it wasn't valid. And so he was like, hey, that's not fair. I want to be let go, because had they entered the warrant, then you wouldn't have pulled me over and you wouldn't have found the drugs. However, that's where the good faith doctrine comes in, is the cops didn't do anything malicious. They were just behind on entering warrants because there weren't enough workers, because there wasn't enough funding to pay for more workers. So they didn't get the warrant entered in. So that is an exception under the good faith. It was unfortunately bad luck for the person that the warrant hadn't been entered in, but that's what we call the good faith doctrine. All right, so we are on to room number 4, the inevitable discovery doctrine.
Right on, guys. Right on. This is about to be the best presentation you guys have ever witnessed. My team was exceptional. We even have a picture I drew myself. When Tiffany had said that if you're the speaker, you don't really have to do much work, I took that to heart, and I did not do anything. So a lot of credit to my team. They were awesome. But so according to our research, this doctrine originated from Iowa in a case titled Nix versus Williams. The trial occurred in 1984, but the actual crime concerning in the case occurred in 1964, and it was Nix who apparently on Christmas Eve abducted a girl from the YMCA, and I believe he murdered her. He eventually went on to murder her, and let me refer to my notes. So he goes on to murder her, and during all the police searches and whatnot, Williams made statements to the police, and he did not have his attorney with him. So he made all these statements, which helped the police find the body of the dead child. The defendants, and then he didn't get his Miranda rights read to him, right? So basically, what the doctrine states is that even if they give admission, even if their admission to evidence is unlawfully given, it can still be used in the case if eventually it would have come out anyway. So basically, if the person gives evidence to a case in an illegal way, but later it's found that evidence would have come out anyway, they can still use it in the case. And here we have our picture of Nick's getting sentenced. He's getting taken away. We got the judge right there, the police taking him away. Yeah, let me make sure I got everything. Yes, in summary, even if evidence is obtained illegally, it can be used if shown later that the evidence would be discovered.
There you go. So good job, good picture, awesome, going the extra mile, giving your team kudos. And you'll see it you will see it happen. You'll see cops, and I've seen this happen, will make mistakes. And I have to tell you, most of the time, you'll do something you don't realize, or it's the heat of the moment, and we're not lawyers, and you're in the moment, and hindsight is 20/20, and you don't always think of something. You're trying for safety, or you're just thinking of what's going on, and you're not thinking of the law right then, and you make mistakes, and because you're always studying, but again, when you're in it, you're not thinking always of what's going to happen, and you're always learning. We're humans, and something will get thrown out. However, and you'll go, oh my gosh, I just lost something. And you feel awful because there's victims of crimes and you're trying to help those victims. However, ever so often you'll keep going in the case, and then due to inevitable discovery, it'll come back into the case. So it's amazing to watch what happens because of the court process. And it's how it should be. It's that checks and balances that always make sure that things happen equitable and fair, so that we're doing things correctly. All right.
Oh, sorry, we did have one question. So in our research, we believe that it was referring to the Sixth Amendment. Is that right? The right to a speedy trial. Okay, right. We just want to make sure.
Correct. No, good job. I'm glad you guys linked that. That's awesome. All right. And finally, we have exigent circumstances, which again is linking our American criminal justice system with our cops and our courts, and that's room 5.
So exigent circumstances can be defined as circumstances that are urgent enough to that there does not need to be a warrant to search. It justifies warrantless entry, search, or seizure by a police when usually a warrant would be required. Our example was Mitchell versus Wisconsin. The driver was unconscious and couldn't be breathalyzed, so they took his blood instead. He wasn't awake to give consent to the blood test, and the situation was dire enough to public safety because he was behind the wheel of a vehicle. They took his blood without a warrant because it was an exigent circumstance, and it came back to be he was way over the legal limit to be driving. And so, yeah.
Okay, good job, room 5. So you'll hear of this a lot also when you'll hear of, like an officer did a traffic stop and the driver took off running, and the officer was following the driver, and he was seen throwing stuff, and the officer was scared he was going to destroy something, so you'll hear a lot about exigent circumstances. So it just depends on what's going on and what the officer in the moment felt. That's the biggest thing, is what the officer felt and can say with their experience in the moment. And so the example you gave was just perfect. Okay, so great job, you guys. Okay, so we're going to kind of continue on with that. So let me see where we're at. And I will share my screen. All right, so you guys did a great job explaining the exclusionary rule. I've gone over MAP v. Ohio, and again, you know, it just talks about how much cops have to know and explain, because what cops are doing in the street affects the court so much and affects what happens. And I have to tell you, it hugely weighed on me. I had no idea before I tested to become a police officer when I was in the academy, and I started learning about all this, and we had the prosecutors and lawyers coming into the academy and teaching us this and knowing the importance of this, how huge this was. And we had victims come in and tell us how certain officers had lost evidence because of the mistakes they had made. And so suspects that were responsible for the deaths of family members had gone off because of mistakes officers had made. And these were true mistakes, and they were there not to complain, but to say, hey, we're here to teach you and to let you know how important this is so that you don't make these same mistakes. I didn't realize the heavy burden that was on me. You know, I'd always seen, you know, the show cops and thought, you know, certain things, but I'd never realized the burden. And so there is a burden on your law enforcement officers out there to really understand these rules and to really make sure when you're on a stop. I hope you realize that every officer should be, I'm not saying they are, but they should be thinking not only about their officer safety and the safety of the people that they serve, but they should be thinking about the Fourth Amendment rules and all of these rules surrounding, because you have no idea where each case is going to go. We can't see the end of these cases. We don't know what everything is going to turn into. And so we always have to think of the big picture, and that everything could be a case and that everything could be evidence. And we have to make sure that we are upholding everybody's rights, especially their Fourth Amendment rights. And so these are all so important. All right, you guys also covered the fruits of the poisonous tree. And so it's that tree is so important. And so if that first act of the officer is not legal, then every single act from that is not legal. So that tree is just so, so important. And I love that story that I told you, how even if that nice person gives you consent, if your first stop with that person doesn't follow the Fourth Amendment of search and seizure and it's not legal, doesn't matter if they give you consent. Nothing else is legal. So this is so, so important. And then the MAP v. Ohio, you guys, the first room number 1 did such a great job covering, you know, MAP v. Ohio and talking about, again, you know, gosh, the officers had 3 hours to go get a search warrant. They could have done it, and they just came back with a piece of paper, and they had pornography. So we had a serious crime going on, and everything was thrown out because they couldn't take the time to go get that. And so this is huge, and it shows you how important people's rights are, and you need to ensure that you make sure you're following the rights of the American people. And then these are just a couple I told you about Otterburn versus State. That was the person who gave consent, and the fruits of the poisonous tree. And then there's another case. This is Wong Sun versus the United States. This is where, just to kind of give you a little history about that, this was a person that was stopped. They had heroin on them. They said, hey, where'd you get that heroin? And he said, oh, I got that heroin from somebody named Black Lil Toy, who runs a laundromat. And they went over there, and the information wasn't right, but they made an arrest. And again, because that information wasn't right and the police didn't do enough research, they should have remembered that original tree. They should have done more research. And because they didn't do more research, all of that information was wrong. The original arrest was thrown out. All right, and then you've got that good faith doctrine. Again, if officers are operating under good faith, and this felt so good to me because I used to be so worried. I can't tell you how often, because officers deal, and this is the same for judges in the court, we are dealing with human beings. And so many times when we make a decision, you just are so scared. You don't know, you're leaning on the scales and you're just going, oh, I just don't know what to do. And how often in your life do you ever make a decision where you're just going, I just don't know what to do. I'm so scared. Should I go here? Should I go? And you put a lot of effort in it. Do you ever take a piece of paper and go pros and cons and you fill out? Believe me, we do that in the cops and courts all the time. There's something called good faith. And as long as you're weighing that and you're thinking about it and you're going through it and you're doing that checks and balances and you're running it past people and you're looking at the experts, you're covered under the good faith doctrine. All right, and again, room 3, you did such a great job. Again, room 2 with fruits of the poisonous tree, and then room 3, good faith doctrine. A great example of the good faith doctrine is the case Hill versus California. Hill this is where the cops go, they're investigating a robbery, which again, a robbery is where somebody threatens somebody with force to commit a theft, force or violence, like robbing a bank with a gun. And the police develop Hill as a suspect in California. They find out where Hill lives, they go to his apartment, and they find somebody who fits Hill's description. And they knock on the door, and a man answers the door who fits Hill's description, and he says, oh, my name's Miller. And police think, he's lying. That is Hill. It fits his description, and he's lying because he doesn't want to be arrested for robbery. Okay? So anyhow, they get in there and they arrest him, and he says, hey, they also do a search incident to arrest on him, and they find evidence on him, and they find out that, guess what, this guy's name really is Miller, it's not Hill. And the US Supreme Court said, hey, they really did think it was Hill. I mean, he was at Hill's apartment. It's normal for somebody to try to avoid arrest for robbery. It was right after the robbery. He fit Hill's description. So that's an example of good faith. All right, back to room 1's example of exclusionary rule. And again, room 4's example of the inevitable discovery doctrine, and that great little picture that Aiden did. You have the inevitable discovery doctrine allows for the admission of illegally obtained evidence if it would have been discovered lawfully in the normal course of events. And it holds that illegally obtained evidence may be admitted if it was also obtained through an independent source, as long as the person, that independent source, wasn't acting under police misconduct. All right, and then here's the example that you gave, so I'm not going to go over that. And then finally, room 5, your exigent circumstances, such as if an officer was in hot pursuit, or like room 5, that was a great example that you gave with the driving under the influence, where you got to get the blood because, you know, it's going to go away. That alcohol is going to get out of the blood. So we have a timing issue. All right, so this kind of finishes it. Do you guys, that's a lot of cases we went over, and I know that's hard to get in your mind. So I do have this PowerPoint listed on Moodle. I am going to ask you about these cases. I don't expect you to memorize them, just know where they're at or have them listed. And then you have no quiz this week. I will review it. I think we have a quiz coming up, but I'll review that with you. We have covered everything. I didn't expect us to. So we will not meet on Thursday unless you guys want to, and we can review this again to go over it again and make sure you guys understand it. We can do some more group work. It's up to you guys. Why don't you answer in your chat? Meet on Thursday, yes or no? Okay, what I'll do is I will have, we've got some people that want to, so I will keep the link up. I will definitely keep the link up to go here, and we can discuss these cases more at length. So I will definitely keep the link up if you want to come here, because there's lots of cases we can discuss to go over these and do some more, because they're definitely really interesting. and go over definitely some more cases and do some definite more work on them. And they're fun to go over, like I said, and I can have some more cases ready to go over them, and we can definitely go and discuss them more at length because they're very fun and very interesting. Okay. Any more questions for today though, or about the assignments or anything we have coming up? Is everybody listening to holiday music? I'm driving my family crazy with holiday music already. All right, you guys, enjoy the day. I will post this recording if you need to review it. I think I got all of the weird characters out of this PowerPoint as I was developing it. Let me know on that if I didn't, and I will see those of you that want to come on Thursday, and we'll discuss some more cases and these rules for the court. All right, you guys, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Right on.
you.
Bye. Thanks.